Early morning in Bogota greeted Camila Castillo with a familiar chill. She parked her silver Renault in the parking lot of a beauty salon and pulled a bag of fresh pastries out of the trunk, a small tradition for her female employees that she'd kept for the fifth year. The massive Belleza Dorada sign swayed faintly in the light breeze, casting whimsical shadows on the sidewalk. The salon smelled clean and expensive cosmetics. Camila flicked a switch and the room was flooded with soft light. Her heels tapped a steady rhythm on the ceramic tile as she walked to the receptionist's desk. Placing her keys on the glass surface, she machine-corrected her flawless style in front of the mirror. Her dark eyes looked tired. Once again, she hadn't gotten a good night's sleep. Mauricio had returned last night past midnight. More work, more important clients, more meetings. Camila had already stopped asking for details. The answers were getting shorter and more irritated. She ran her hand over her ivory silk blouse, straightening invisible folds. 35 years old, and she still attended to every detail of her image, as if she were 25 again and just opening her first salon. Victoria, as always, showed up before the other employees. Her brown hair was gathered into an elegant bun, and her eyes read concern for her friend. "You've been up all night again," she said affirmatively rather than inquiringly, taking the bag of croissants from Camila's hands. "I'm fine. Just a lot of work." Camila tried to smile, but the smile came out strained. Victoria shook her head and headed towards the small kitchen where they usually had breakfast before starting the day. Camila followed her, turning on the coffee machine as she went. A quiet whirring filled the space, mingling with the sounds of the waking city outside the window. "How long have we known each other? 15 years? I can see something's wrong." Victoria placed the pastries on plates while Camila prepared their traditional morning cappuccino. Camila sank into a chair, cradling the hot cup in her palms. She wanted to be silent, to hide all her problems deep inside, but the words came out. "He's like a ghost in the house. He comes late. He leaves early. We hardly talk to each other. He used to always talk about his projects, ask my advice. Now—" She fell silent, looking at the pattern of milk foam on the surface of the coffee. "Have you been anywhere together for a long time? A theater? A restaurant? Just a walk?" Victoria broke off a piece of croissant but was in no hurry to eat it. "Went to his business partner's birthday party 3 months ago. Mauricio spent the whole evening discussing some contracts, and I sat next to him like a decoration." The bitterness in Camila's voice was almost palpable. A car honked outside the window and Camila shuddered. The first clients would be arriving soon. She had to get a grip on herself. She mechanically pulled out her day planner, checking her notes for the day. "You know what I think?" Victoria covered her friend's hand with her palm, forcing her to pull away from her notes. "If you still love him, you need to fight for your relationship." "How?" Camila looked up with a look that read a mixture of hope and weariness. "For starters, stop hiding behind your work. You're a beautiful woman, but lately, you've been dressing like a businesswoman at a funeral. Where are those brightly colored dresses that Mauricio loved so much? Remember how he couldn't take his eyes off you at last year's carnival?" Camila smiled involuntarily, remembering that night. The red dress she'd bought especially for the festivities, her husband's admiring gaze, his hands on her waist as she danced. Men are visualizers. They need to be reminded of what a treasure is around them. Update your closet, change your hair. Not for him, for yourself. "A self-confident woman attracts eyes," Victoria said with heat, and Camila felt a long-forgotten excitement awakening inside. The first employees began to appear in the salon. There were greetings, the sound of instruments being turned on, the rustle of chairs being unzipped. Camila straightened, squared her shoulders. "You're right. Something needs to change." She pulled a mirror out of her purse, critically examining her reflection. "Maybe I really should change my hair." "And not just your hair." Victoria winked conspiratorially. I know a stylist at the mall. Why don't we go see him on Saturday? Camila nodded, feeling something akin to hope awaken inside. Maybe all was not yet lost. Maybe she could bring back the warmth that had once been between them. The day slowly gained momentum. Camila plunged into the usual routine, meetings with clients, checking documents, ordering materials. But her thoughts kept returning to her friend's words. She caught her reflection in one of the many mirrors of the salon. A strict suit, discreet makeup, discreet jewelry. When had she turned into a typical middle-aged businesswoman? Where was the passionate Colombian woman Mauricio had once fallen in love with? Toward evening, as the flow of customers began to thin, Victoria approached her again. I've booked you in for a full spa treatment next Tuesday, and don't argue. It's a gift. Let's start bringing back your natural beauty. Camila wanted to object, to say she had appointments scheduled, but faltered. All appointments could be rescheduled. Her marriage was more important. Thank you, she hugged her friend. You always know what I need. As she closed the salon, Camila felt unusually elated. The plan was simple, to reclaim the woman she used to be, not for Mauricio's sake, but for her own. After all, she was still young, beautiful, and full of life. Getting into the car, she dialed her husband's number. After the fifth ring, the voicemail went straight to voicemail. Camila left a short message saying she would make his favorite dinner. She didn't let the disappointment of an unanswered call ruin her mood. Evening Bogota greeted her with the usual traffic jams. Camila turned on the radio where an old romantic ballad was playing. She began to sing along softly, remembering how she and Mauricio had loved to dance to such songs in their first, still-rented apartment. Maybe she should have a night like that. Dimmed lights, the music of their youth, a glass of good wine. As she parked in front of the house, she noticed that the lights in the windows of their apartment were off, so Mauricio hadn't returned yet. Well, she would have time to prepare everything properly. Camila pulled out her phone and opened a text message from Victoria. Don't forget, we're going shopping at 11 on Saturday. Have your credit card ready. With a slight smile, she headed for the entryway. Tomorrow would be a new day and she would greet it a different woman. Saturday was surprisingly sunny. Camila woke up earlier than usual, trying not to wake Mauricio, who came home well past midnight. She walked quietly to the kitchen where she started making coffee, glancing at her watch. It was 3 hours before her meeting with Victoria, but the inner tension kept her in her seat. Last night had been spent alone again. The dinner had gone cold and Mauricio hadn't even bothered to call to warn her of the delay. Camila had stood at the stove for hours preparing his favorite dishes, but finally put everything away in containers and put it in the fridge. The sound of the coffee machine cut through the morning silence. Camila flinched and quickly turned off the appliance, listening for sounds from the bedroom. But no, Mauricio continued to sleep. She poured herself a cup and stepped out onto the small balcony of their 12th-floor apartment. The morning air was fresh, and somewhere in the distance she could hear church bells ringing. At 10 o'clock, the phone rang. Victoria, as always, was enthusiastic. I hope you're ready for a complete transformation. She sounded confident and determined. To be honest, I'm a little nervous, Camila admitted, looking at her reflection in the hallway mirror. That's normal. Change is always scary. I'll wait for you at the mall entrance. Mauricio never woke up for her departure. Camila left a note on the kitchen table. Going on an errand. Dinner's in the fridge. She used to write kiss or love, but those words had long since disappeared from their daily interactions. Victoria waited at the entrance to Plaza Central, one of Bogota's trendiest shopping centers. Her brightly colored dress stood out in the crowd and a confident smile shone on her face. Let's start with your hair, she commanded, striding confidently toward the salon. I've booked you in with the best stylist. The next 2 hours turned into a whirlwind of events. The hands of an experienced master worked magic on Camila's hair, transforming her severe bob into soft, flowing curls. A light chalking added volume and freshness to her hair. "Now you look like your real self." Victoria nodded contentedly, looking at the result. Camila tentatively touched her hair. She did indeed look younger, fresher, but the inner fear hadn't gone anywhere. "What if—" she began, but Victoria interrupted firmly. "No what ifs. We're just getting started." The next stop was a designer clothing boutique. The consultant, alerted by Victoria, had already prepared several sets. "Forget black and gray," Victoria commanded, selecting racks of business suits. "You need colors that accentuate your beauty." Try on after try on, Camila felt a long-forgotten feeling awaken inside. The emerald dress emphasized her figure without looking vulgar. The white blouse with a deep but elegant neckline gave the image sensuality. The burgundy-colored pencil skirt made her remember that she still had great legs. "What a look!" Victoria exclaimed triumphantly as Camila stepped out in yet another outfit. "Just the way you should be." By lunchtime, they took a break at a small cafe. Camila still felt unfamiliar in her new look, but with every passing minute the uncertainty was receding. "Now you need to update your underwear," Victoria announced as she finished her smoothie. "And don't argue. It's an important part of the transformation." At the lingerie store, Camila felt herself blush. For the past few years, she'd been buying practical sets in neutral colors. "Try this on." Victoria held out a black lace set to her. "And this one," she added, choosing something powdery pink. Camila walked into the fitting room feeling awkward, but when she saw her reflection in the first set, something changed. She suddenly remembered how confident she used to be, how much she loved to please her husband. The day flew by. They visited a cosmetics store, where the makeup artist picked out a new palette for Camila, brighter but still elegant. They bought several pairs of shoes, from classic loafers to sleek sandals. "One last touch," Victoria announced, leading her friend into the perfume boutique. "You need a new fragrance, something special, not like your usual perfume." The consultant spent a long time selecting a composition until she found the perfect match, a warm, sensual fragrance with notes of jasmine and amber. Returning home with many packages, Camila felt a strange excitement. She looked at her watch. Mauricio should have been back by now. What would he say when he saw her like this? The lights were on in the apartment. Camila took a deep breath before opening the door. Mauricio was sitting in the living room with his laptop, but looked up when she walked in. For a second, something resembling his former interest flashed in his gaze. "Did you change your hair?" he asked, and there was a warm note in his voice. "Yeah, decided to update the look a bit." Camila smiled as she walked past him towards the bedroom. She could feel his gaze on her, and for the first time in a long time she liked it. In the evening, as she was sorting through her shopping, she heard Mauricio talking on the phone in the next room. His voice sounded muffled, as if he didn't want her to hear the conversation. Camila froze, but quickly pushed the disturbing thoughts away. No, she wouldn't be thinking bad thoughts today. She pulled out her new navy-colored dress, examining it critically. Tomorrow was the big day, Sunday lunch with Mauricio's business partners. She hadn't given much thought to such meetings before, but now. Victoria texted, "How was the house appearance? Did you make an impression?" "He noticed the changes," Camila replied. "It's just the beginning," came the instant reply. Before going to bed, Camila stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time. New hair, light makeup, silk pajamas instead of her usual cotton ones. She really did look different, younger, more confident. But why did a vague uneasiness still settle in her chest? Mauricio was already in bed when she came out of the bathroom. He looked up from the phone, and this time his gaze lingered on her longer than usual. "You seem different today," he said, and there was surprise in his voice. "Is that a bad thing?" Camila slid under the covers. "No," he was quiet. "It suits you." That night, for the first time in a long time, they fell asleep with their backs turned to each other instead of back to back as they had been for the past few months. A small victory, Camila thought as she fell asleep. A small step towards getting their old relationship back on track. 2 weeks had passed since Camila's transformation began. Monday morning started out unusually. Mauricio hadn't left for work early but was cooking breakfast in the kitchen. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and toasted toast filled the apartment. Camila froze in the doorway, watching her husband deftly handle the whisk, beating the eggs for the omelet. "Good morning," he pronounced upon noticing her. "Thought I'd surprise you." Camila smiled, taking a seat at the bar. She was wearing a new silk robe dress, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She noticed her husband's gaze sliding over her figure, lingering a little longer than usual. "Are you traveling to the office late today?" she asked, taking the cup of coffee from his hands. "First meeting isn't until 10. Mauricio placed the omelet on a plate, garnishing it with fresh herbs. "Thought we could have breakfast together." They ate in an unaccustomed silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Camila felt a warmth spill inside. Moments like this had become rare lately. "By the way," Mauricio set his fork aside, "I made a reservation at La Terrazza for Friday. Aren't you busy tonight?" Camila's heart sank. La Terrazza was one of Bogotá's most romantic restaurants. They'd been there often in the early years of their marriage. "No, I'm not busy," she tried to keep her voice calm. "Then I'll pick you up at 7. He finished his coffee and rose from the table. As he walked past, he touched her shoulder lightly, a simple gesture, but it sent a shiver through Camila's body. In the salon, Victoria immediately noticed the change in her friend's mood. "Tell me," she demanded, pulling Camila into the back room. "He invited me to dinner at La Terraza." Camila couldn't hold back a smile. "I told you," Victoria exclaimed triumphantly. "Men begin to appreciate what they can lose. You've become different, and he's noticed it." The day flew by in pleasant excitement. Camila dealt with clients with a special enthusiasm, her smile becoming genuine. Even a cranky regular client, dissatisfied with the shade of coloring, could not spoil her mood. When she returned home in the evening, she found Mauricio in the living room. He was sitting in a chair with his phone, but quickly set it aside with the screen down when she appeared. "I was thinking of ordering pizza for dinner," he said. "Do you mind?" They settled on the couch with pizza and glasses of wine. Mauricio turned on some movie, but Camila barely followed the plot, enjoying the simple fact of having him around. At one point, he put his arm around her shoulders, a natural gesture she'd been waiting for. Mauricio's phone vibrated. He cast a quick glance at the screen and frowned. "Sorry, gotta take this. Work issue." He got up and walked out onto the balcony. Camila tried not to listen to the muffled conversation, but something in her husband's tone made her tense. He spoke softly, curtly. An unfamiliar intonation slipped into his voice. When he returned, he seemed a little distracted. "Is everything all right?" Camila asked. "Yeah, just having trouble with one project," he smiled, but the smile came out strained. "I'll have to stay late at work tomorrow." The next few days went by at a strange rhythm. Mauricio began to be home more often in the evenings, but his phone rang constantly. He would always leave to talk and return with a slight shadow of worry on his face. On Thursday, he arrived unexpectedly at Camila's salon during his lunch break. "Thought I'd surprise you," he explained, holding out a dainty box. Inside was a thin gold bracelet with a small diamond. "Saw it in the window and thought of you." Mauricio clasped the jewelry around her wrist. Victoria, who was watching the scene, nodded approvingly. It looks like our plan is working even better than we had hoped. But in the evening of the same day, something strange happened. Camila woke up around midnight to find Mauricio not in bed. From the study came his muffled voice. "No, I can't talk right now. Yes, I understand. We have to wait a little while." She froze at the door, hesitant to enter. Something in his tone was wrong, too intimate for a business conversation. Friday came with a sense of anticipation and vague anxiety. Camila had spent all day preparing for the evening. She'd done her hair, chosen a new burgundy-colored dress that perfectly accentuated her figure. Mauricio arrived exactly at 7, dressed in an expensive suit. He looked impeccable, but Camila noticed a slight nervousness in his movements. The restaurant greeted them with dim candlelight and live music. Their table was by the window, with a magnificent view of evening Bogota. Mauricio ordered their favorite wine and was unusually attentive. "You look beautiful," he said, looking into her eyes. "Lately it's like you've been glowing from the inside out." Camila smiled, feeling her heart fill with warmth. "I'm trying." She took a sip of wine. "I want us to be okay." Mauricio reached across the table and squeezed her fingers. At that moment, his phone vibrated again. He cast a quick glance at the screen and visibly tensed. "I'm sorry. I have to take this." He rose from the table. "It's urgent." Camila watched him take a quick step toward the exit of the hall. Something about his gait, the way he held the phone, was vaguely unsettling. She caught herself wanting to follow him, to eavesdrop on the conversation, but pushed the thought away. Upon returning, Mauricio seemed distracted. He tried to return to the atmosphere of the evening, but something had subtly changed. His smile became a little more strained, his gaze occasionally pausing on his phone. After dinner, they drove home in silence. Mauricio turned on the radio, as if trying to fill the silence. Camila stared out the window, going over the events of the last few weeks in her mind. Yes, he'd been more attentive, spending more time at home, giving gifts. But why did it all seem false? In the apartment, Mauricio went straight into the shower. Camila sat in front of the mirror, slowly removing her jewelry. The bracelet he'd given her the day before glittered dimly in the light of the lamps. She remembered how he used to give her jewelry, spontaneously, with sincere joy. Now every gesture seemed carefully thought out, as if part of some plan. Mauricio's phone, left on the nightstand, flashed silently. Camila involuntarily glanced at the screen and saw the beginning of the message. "Honey, I miss you so much." She turned away abruptly, feeling her heart clench in her chest. The water was still running noisily in the bathroom. Camila took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. Perhaps she had just imagined it. Perhaps it was a work message she'd misread. Perhaps. Sunday morning was overcast. Camila awoke to the sound of rain drumming on the eaves. Mauricio was no longer there, unusual for a day off. On his pillow was a note. "Urgent call to the facility. Back by lunch." She walked slowly to the kitchen, mechanically turned on the coffee maker. Yesterday's message on her husband's cell phone had kept her up all night. Camila lay awake, listening to the breathing of Mauricio sleeping next to her and trying to convince herself that there was a reasonable explanation for everything. The sound of the coffee machine interrupted her thoughts. She pulled out her favorite cup, a gift from Mauricio last Christmas. He'd spent an entire evening wrapping it, trying to make the perfect bow. The memory echoed with a sharp pain in her chest. The living room was chilly. Camila turned the air conditioner on warm and settled on the couch with a cup of coffee. Her gaze fell on her husband's laptop, forgotten on the coffee table. Mauricio usually always took it with him, especially when he traveled for work-related matters. The screen glowed faintly. The laptop was in sleep mode. Camila reached for it, not realizing what she was doing. With a single mouse movement, the screen came to life. The mail client was open. Her hand shook as she scrolled down the page. Business letters, reports, contracts, and suddenly, personal correspondence. Her heart sank when she saw the sender's name, Mariana Valencia. Darling, I can't wait to see you again. This stolen watch is the only thing keeping me afloat. Camila read letter after letter, feeling reality shattering into splinters. Mariana worked for Mauricio's company. Judging from the correspondence, their affair had been going on for over 6 months. Are you really going to sign everything over to me? What about your wife? Mariana wrote in one of the emails. Don't worry about that. I've thought it all out. Camila won't suspect anything until it's too late, Mauricio replied. The letters became increasingly frank. Plans for a vacation together, discussions about their future life together, details of meetings at the hotel. Camila read, unable to stop, as if falling into a nightmare. Honey, maybe we shouldn't give her the bracelet. That's money we could spend on our future, wrote Mariana the day before Mauricio presented Camila with the gift. We need to put her guard down. She suspects something. I can see it in her eyes, he replied. In one of his last letters, Mariana wrote, I found a beautiful house in the suburbs, the one we dreamed of. As soon as you transfer the company assets to me. Camila slammed the laptop shut. Her ears were noisy and her hands were shaking. She looked at the bracelet she still wore, a symbol of his lies, not his love, ripped it off her wrist and tossed it on the table. The phone rang, making her flinch. Victoria. Hey, girlfriend, how was last night? Camila couldn't utter a word. An anxious silence hung in the receiver. What happened? Victoria's voice became serious. Can you come over? The words came out with difficulty. Please. Victoria arrived 20 minutes later. One look at her friend was enough for her to realize something terrible had happened. Camila sat in a chair, unnaturally straight, clutching her cell phone in her hands. I know everything, she uttered as Victoria sank down beside her. About Mariana, about their plans, about why he's suddenly so attentive. She silently handed her friend the laptop. Victoria read, and her face grew increasingly grim. Scum, she exhaled as she finished reading. What a scum! I was such a fool, Camila said quietly, lifelessly. Believed I could fix everything, that it was enough to become more beautiful, more desirable. No, Victoria grabbed her hands. You're not a fool. You're a loving woman who believed in her marriage. He's a scoundrel who doesn't deserve you. What are you going to do? Victoria asked cautiously. I don't know, Camila shook her head. I have to talk to my father. She stood up and began mechanically gathering her things, her wallet, her car keys, her cell phone. The movements were crisp, as if memorized. I'm coming with you, Victoria said firmly. No, Camila paused. I need to be alone with my father. Mauricio can't know that I found out. Not yet. Victoria wanted to object, but something in her friend's eyes stopped her. It was the first time in their entire friendship that she'd seen such cold determination in them. Call me when you're free, was all she said. Camila nodded. Already at the door, she turned around. Thank you for everything. When she got behind the wheel, she didn't start the car right away. Her hands were still shaking, but her thoughts were becoming clearer. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed her father's number. Dad, I need to talk to you. It's really important. The drive to her father's house had never seemed so long. Camila drove on autopilot, the lines of letters still in front of her eyes. Everything was coming together. The strange phone calls, the sudden generosity, the business meetings on weekends. Her husband, the man she'd lived with for 12 years, planned to leave her without everything. And this girl, Mariana. How many times had they crossed paths at corporate events? How many times had she smiled politely at Camila, knowing she was sleeping with her husband? The phone rang, bringing her out of her daze. Mauricio. Honey, I'm going to be longer than I planned. Don't expect me for lunch." "Okay, honey. I'll be busy at the salon." Her voice sounded almost natural. "Love you." Those words, which had made her heart beat faster before, now sounded like mockery. She parked in front of her father's house and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. She needed all her stamina right now, all her strength, because this wasn't just cheating, it was war, and she wasn't going to lose. Rodrigo Velasquez's mansion stood on a hill in an upscale neighborhood of Bogota. Camila stopped the car at the massive wrought iron gates, waved habitually at the security camera. The shutters slowly opened, letting her into the grounds. The manicured garden, worked on by the best landscape designers in the city, seemed alien and cold today. Ernesto, the butler who had served the house for over 20 years, met her at the threshold. "Señorita Camila, Don Rodrigo is waiting for you in the study." She nodded as she passed him. On another day, she would certainly have asked him about the health of his grandchildren, but today, even a simple conversation seemed an impossible task. Her father's study always filled her with awe, a huge room with dark mahogany paneling, a massive desk, and portraits of her ancestors on the walls. Rodrigo sat in his favorite leather chair, looking over some documents. At the sight of his daughter, he immediately set the papers aside. "Camila." Something in her face made him rise abruptly. Rodrigo Velasquez had seen a lot in his 65 years, but the look in his daughter's eyes frightened even him. "Papa," her voice trembled, and that was enough. Rodrigo walked silently to the bar and poured 2 glasses of sherry, an old family tradition for serious conversations. He held one out to his daughter. "Sit down and tell me everything." Camila sank into the chair, clutching the glass as if it were the last straw she held on to. Slowly, trying to remain calm, she began to tell about the letters, about Mariana, about Mauricio's plans to transfer all the assets and leave her with nothing. Rodrigo listened in silence. When his daughter finished, he rose and strode into the study. His footsteps were muffled by the thick Persian carpet. "That boy," he muttered through gritted teeth. "I never believed in his business acumen. All his successes are my connections, my recommendations." He paused at the window, looking out at the garden below. "Are you sure about what you've read?" Camila silently pulled out her phone and showed the pictures of the letters she had thoughtfully taken. "Scoundrel," Rodrigo returned to his chair. "Daughter, listen to me carefully. The most important thing now is not to show him that you know everything." He pressed a button on the desk, summoning the secretary. "Send Ramirez to me, immediately." 10 minutes later, a lean, middle-aged man entered the office. Gabriel Ramirez, the Velasquez family's personal lawyer. "Don Rodrigo, Señorita Camila," he said hello, taking a seat at the conference table. "Gabriel, tell me all about my son-in-law's company." Rodrigo spoke calmly, but there was steel in his voice. The next hour passed discussing the legal intricacies. Ramirez laid out the documents in front of them, explained asset ownership schemes, possible loopholes in the law. "Mauricio's main advantage is time," the lawyer concluded. "If he has time to transfer the assets before we act—" "He won't have time," Rodrigo interrupted, "because we're starting right now." He turned to his daughter. "Camila, you're going to have to play the lead in this play. Can you do it?" She nodded, feeling a cold determination growing inside. "I can." "Good." Rodrigo pulled a cigar from his desk drawer but didn't light it. "Gabriel, prepare all the necessary paperwork and call Alvarez. We'll need his help at the bank." Ramirez nodded understandingly and began gathering the papers. When he came out, Rodrigo sat down next to his daughter. "You need to come home and act normal. Not one hint that you know the truth. It's important." "I understand," Camila squared her shoulders. "But how do I—" "Think about the fact that every kiss he gives you, every touch he gives you, is a step toward his downfall," Rodrigo said stiffly. Is he playing with you? That's fine. You'll play better. There was a delicate knock at the door. Maria, the housekeeper, entered. Don Rodrigo, dinner is served. Thank you, Maria. We'll be there in a minute. Camila shook her head. I'm not hungry. You should eat. Her father took her hand. You're going to need your strength. And by the way, this is a great excuse to practice. If you can't eat properly now, how are you going to have dinner with him? The dining room was bright and cool. A massive mahogany table was set for two. Camila mechanically picked up her fork, but a bite wouldn't go down her throat. After lunch, they returned to the study. Ramirez was already waiting for them with a new stack of documents. The first step is for us to gain full control of the company's financial flows, the lawyer began. I have a plan. They spent the next few hours discussing strategy. Camila listened intently, taking notes on her phone. Her hands were no longer shaking. Mauricio is used to relying on my support in business, Rodrigo was saying. He won't even realize where the blow came from. It was getting dark by the time Camila got ready to leave. At the study door, her father stopped her. Remember, you're not alone. No matter what happens, I'm here for you. She hugged him, smelling the familiar scent of tobacco and expensive cologne. Thank you, Dad. On the way home, Camila turned on the radio, trying to distract herself from her thoughts. The news was on. Something about politics, the economy, social life. It all seemed so distant and unimportant. The phone vibrated a message from Mauricio. I'll be late. Don't wait up. She answered as usual. Okay, honey. Kisses. Every word was difficult, but she managed. Her father was right. She could play her part. And then Mauricio would learn what it meant to betray the Velasquez family. Tuesday began as usual. Camila woke up to the sound of the alarm clock at 6:30, made coffee, and got ready for work. Mauricio was asleep. He'd been back past midnight last night, smelling of expensive whiskey and other people's perfume. She mechanically adjusted the blanket on his shoulder, as she had done hundreds of times over the years of their marriage. Only now, every touch resonated with a muffled ache inside. In the parlor, the first thing she did was check the message from her father. Ramirez has gone into action. Be ready. Camila deleted the message and plunged into her work, trying not to give away her condition. Victoria, who knew the truth, cast concerned glances at her, but didn't dare speak in front of the rest of the staff. Around noon, Mauricio called, Darling, there's an important dinner with the partners tonight. Will you be able to attend? Of course, honey. She was surprised at how easy those words came. What time should I be ready? I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something special. Camila chose the dark blue dress she'd recently bought with Victoria. It accentuated her figure perfectly, but still looked austere enough for a business dinner. She carefully styled her hair, applied her makeup. Everything as usual, not a hint of the storm raging inside. Mauricio arrived exactly at 7, as promised. He gave her an approving look. You look beautiful. Waiting for them at the restaurant were 3 men, Mauricio's business partners in the new project. Camila smiled politely, keeping the conversation going, feigning interest in discussing the construction of the new apartment complex. An inner voice whispered, I wonder if they know about his plans. Are they in on it? After dinner, already at home, Mauricio received a phone call. He went out onto the balcony, closing the door tightly behind him, but Camila, pretending to be busy removing her makeup in the bathroom, left the door ajar. Yes, baby girl, his voice sounded muffled. Everything's going according to plan. No, she has no idea about anything. Of course, all the property will be yours, I promised. In 3 days we start acting. Camila looked in the mirror, watching her hands methodically remove her makeup. Not a single muscle on her face trembled. Inside, everything paled. Finished talking, Mauricio returned to the bedroom. He looked content, relaxed. He came up behind Camila and kissed her neck. "You were great tonight. The partners are thrilled." She smiled through the mirror. "I'm glad I helped you make a good impression." As Mauricio fell asleep, Camila cautiously stepped out into the living room, dialed her father's number. "Dad, I just heard them talking. We have 3 days." Rodrigo answered immediately, as if he had been expecting this call. "Don't worry. Ramirez has already prepared all the documents. We'll start the operation tomorrow morning." "What do I have to do?" "Daughter, maybe you should move in with me." Camila shook her head, though her father couldn't see it. "No, I have to be here, watching his every move." In the morning, she made breakfast as if nothing had happened. Mauricio came down to the kitchen, already dressed in an expensive suit. Pancakes? You spoil me," he kissed her cheek. "Just wanted to make you happy." She set a plate in front of him. His cell phone vibrated. Mauricio frowned, reading the message. "Is something wrong?" Camila asked with a perfectly measured amount of concern in her voice. "No, nothing serious. Work matters." She noticed the way his hand trembled as he answered the message. Had something not gone according to his plan? The day at the salon stretched on interminably. Camila worked on autopilot, keeping up conversations with her clients, smiling, giving advice on hair care. And the scraps of an overheard conversation were spinning in her head. Victoria chose a moment when they were alone. "How are you holding up?" "Fine." Camila adjusted the bouquet on the receptionist's desk. "You know, it's kind of weird. I thought it would be harder to fake it." "You're strong." Victoria squeezed her hand. "But remember, I'm always here for you." In the evening, her father called. "Camila, I have news. Ramirez has discovered that Mauricio has already started transferring some assets to shell companies." "What?" "Don't worry. We'll have time to block all the transfers, but you need to be extra careful. He might suspect something." After the conversation, Camila stood under the hot shower for a long time, letting the water wash away the tension of the day. She heard Mauricio come home, walking around the apartment talking on the phone. Stepping out of the bathroom, she pulled on a silk nightgown, one of the ones she had recently bought for him. Now every such action seemed part of the act. "Rough day?" she asked, climbing into bed. Mauricio mumbled something in response, not looking away from the phone. His face looked tense, a deep crease between his eyebrows. "Honey, why don't you put off work? It's getting late." She touched his shoulder. Yeah, now," he continued typing the message. Camila turned her back to the wall, feeling the cold rage growing inside. 3 days. He thinks he has 3 days to ruin her life. What he doesn't know is that those 3 days will be the beginning of his own downfall. The phone vibrates a message from Ramirez. "Everything is ready. We start phase 1 tomorrow." She deleted the message and closed her eyes, listening to the sound of Mauricio typing. I wonder what he's writing to his mistress. Promises her a bright future? Tells her how cleverly he's pulling off his plan. He'll soon learn what it means to underestimate Camila Castillo Velasquez. The morning sun was barely breaking through the blinds in Rodrigo Velasquez's office when Gabriel Ramirez entered. The lawyer looked tired. Apparently, he had spent all night working on documents. He held a weighty folder in his hands. "Good morning, Don Rodrigo. I have prepared all the necessary paperwork for the first phase of the operation." Rodrigo gestured for him to sit down. 2 cups of freshly brewed coffee were already on the table. He knew this was going to be a long day. "Report," he commanded briefly, unfolding the first document. "We've uncovered 3 shell companies into which Mauricio has begun transferring assets. They're all registered to shell companies, but we were able to trace the connection." Ramirez laid out the charts and statements in front of his boss. At that moment, Camila entered the office. She looked flawless in her business suit, but her father noticed the shadows under her eyes that even skillfully applied makeup couldn't hide. "Daughter, you should have been at the salon," he rebuked gently. "I want to know all the details." She sank into the chair next to Ramirez. "This is my life, Papa." Rodrigo nodded. "Go on, Gabrielle." They spent the next hour sorting out the intricacies of Mauricio's financial machinations. He turned out to be smarter than they'd anticipated. The scheme had been thought out to the last detail. "Here's where he made his biggest mistake," Ramirez pointed to one of the documents. "He used Don Rodrigo's connections to get a large loan for a new project. The bank only loaned the money because of your reputation. And now we can use that against him." Rodrigo rose and walked to the window. "Is Alvarez at the bank yet?" "Yes. He's waiting for our signal." Camila listened silently, memorizing every detail. Her phone vibrated a message from Mauricio. "Running late for work. Don't wait up for dinner." She replied as usual, "Okay, honey. Take care." Every word reverberated with bitterness. "Here we go." Rodrigo returned to the table and dialed a number. "Alvarez?" "Yes, run a check." Across town, at the main office of Bancolombia, Fernando Alvarez, head of security, ordered an unscheduled audit of all loans to Mauricio's company. Camila returned to the beauty parlor close to lunchtime. Victoria met her with a concerned look. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just a little business with my dad." She smiled, strained, and plunged into her work. Around 3 in the afternoon, Ramirez called, "Señorita Camila, the first results are in. The bank found discrepancies in the documentation. They have suspended all operations on the company's accounts." "Does he know yet?" "Should be notified in the next few minutes." Indeed, half an hour later, Mauricio called her in a clear panic. "Camila, you won't believe it. There's been some kind of mistake at the bank. All the accounts have been blocked. I'm on my way there to sort it out." "Oh my God!" She gave a perfect expression of fright. "How could this have happened?" "I don't know. Probably just a misunderstanding. Don't worry, I'll fix it." There was confidence in his voice, but Camila knew this was just the beginning. In the evening, she arrived at her father's house. A council of war had already gathered in the study, with Rodrigo, Ramirez, and Alvarez discussing the next steps. "The bank audit revealed serious irregularities," Alvarez reported. "We have every right to freeze all assets until the circumstances are clarified." "How did he react?" Rodrigo asked. "Flew to the bank 20 minutes after notification, demanded a meeting with management, threatened lawsuits. But when he was shown the documents with the discrepancies, he kept quiet." Camila listened in silence. She imagined Mauricio thrashing around the bank, trying to salvage his plan. She wondered if he'd called Mariana yet. Had he told her that their dreams of a beautiful life were beginning to crumble? "The next step is the suppliers." Rodrigo unfolded a new folder. "Ramirez, have you prepared the letters?" "Yes. All the company's main partners are here. As soon as they get word of the problems with the bank, they'll start demanding immediate payment on all contracts," Rodrigo finished for him. "And there will be nothing to pay." Camila got home late. Mauricio sat in the living room, piled up with papers. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his tie off to the side. "Honey, did you have dinner?" she asked as she walked by. "Not before." He didn't even look up. "There's some kind of nightmare going on. I think someone's trying to ruin my business." "Our business," she mentally corrected. After all, she technically owned half of the company as her spouse. Mauricio must have forgotten that while planning his scam. At night, she woke up to the sound of his voice. He spoke on the phone in the office. "No, baby, do not worry. These are temporary difficulties. Of course, our plans are on track." Camila lay in the dark, listening to his lies. Even now, when everything was starting to fall apart, he continued to build air castles for his mistress. She called Ramirez first thing in the morning. He's been on the phone all night. It seems he's trying to find new sources of funding. Don't worry, Señorita Camila. We have already contacted all the major banks in the country. No one will give him a loan. At the salon, she worked as usual, smiling at the customers, giving hair care tips. No one, except Victoria, had any idea of the storm raging in her soul. After lunch, her father called, "Camila, there's news. We found the deeds to a house in the suburbs. Guess whose name is on the deed?" "Mariana," she exhaled. "Exactly. But don't worry, we've already contacted the seller. The deal will be canceled." In the evening, Mauricio returned home in a state close to despair. He hadn't even noticed that Camila had cooked his favorite dish. "Is something wrong?" she asked with a perfect dose of concern in her voice. "Everything is falling apart." He collapsed into his chair. "Suppliers are demanding immediate payment. The bank has frozen accounts. Investors are refusing meetings." She crouched next to him, put a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe we should go to Dad. He might be able to help." Mauricio jerked as if from a blow. "No, I mean, you shouldn't bother him. I'll manage on my own." Camila nodded, hiding a bitter chuckle. Of course, he couldn't go to his father-in-law. That would mean revealing all the cards. Late that night, she sent a message to her father. "He's on edge. What's next?" The reply came almost immediately. "We'll strike the final blow tomorrow. Be ready." Friday morning was the first time Camila intentionally followed Mauricio. After he left the house, she followed downstairs and got into her car, keeping a safe distance. His silver Mercedes was not traveling toward the office, but in the opposite direction. Mauricio parked near a small cafe in a quiet part of town. A few minutes later, a cab pulled up there and a young woman got out. Camila recognized Mariana at once. She was often at the company's corporate events. A slender brunette in an expensive suit, about 10 years younger than Camila herself. They met like old acquaintances. No hugs or kisses in public. They simply walked into the cafe and took a table by the window. Camila parked so that she could see them but not be seen, pulled out her cell phone and dialed Ramirez's number. "They're meeting at Café La Esperanza. Looks like something urgent." Mauricio didn't even take the usual precautions. "We'll send a man to record their conversation," the lawyer replied. "Stay where you are and observe." 15 minutes later, a young man with a tablet and headphones, one of Ramirez's assistants, approached the cafe. He sat down at a nearby table, ostensibly immersed in his work. Camila watched the couple through the window. Mauricio looked anxious, glancing around every now and then. Mariana placed her hand on his, a gesture once reserved for Camila. A ring glittered on her ring finger, an exact replica of the one Mauricio had given his wife on their 10th anniversary. The phone vibrated. A message from Victoria. "Where are you? There are 3 clients waiting at the salon." "I'll be there in an hour. Tell her you're stuck in traffic," she replied quickly. The appointment lasted about 40 minutes. When Mariana got up to leave, Mauricio discreetly squeezed her hand. This intimate gesture felt like a knife stabbed Camila's heart. After his mistress left, Mauricio sat at the table for another 10 minutes, frantically typing something into his phone. Ramirez's assistant left the cafe as well, but before he left, he showed Camila a sign that the recording had been received. Camila watched her husband get into the car and drive off in the direction of the office. Only then did she allow herself to exhale. Her hands gripping the steering wheel trembled slightly. There was an emergency waiting for her at the salon. 3 important clients demanded her immediate attention. Victoria cast a questioning glance at her friend, but Camila just shook her head, "Not now." Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ramirez called, "Señorita Camila, the tape has been decrypted. They were discussing problems with the bank. Mariana is in a panic. She's afraid their plan will be exposed." "What exactly did they say?" Mauricio convinced her he could fix it, promised to find new investors, But the best part is, they plan to meet tonight at the Magnolia Hotel. Sounds like your husband is cooking up some kind of backup plan. After work, she drove to her father's house. Rodrigo listened to the surveillance report, looked at the photos taken at the cafe. Well done, daughter. He put a hand on her shoulder. Now tell me, how do you really feel? Camila clenched her fists. I want them to pay. Both of them. For every lie, for every stolen kiss, for every moment I felt guilty thinking I wasn't good enough for him. Rodrigo nodded. They will pay. But right now we need to proceed very carefully. Ramirez, what's the latest on the documents? The lawyer laid out fresh papers on the table. We're almost finished reissuing the main assets. The real estate issue remains to be settled. What about the company? Camila asked. Suppliers have started breaking contracts. Without access to bank accounts, the company can't fulfill its obligations. By the end of next week, it will no longer be a business but a pile of debt. Camila returned home in the evening. Mauricio was about to leave. Sorry, darling. Urgent meeting with investors. Don't wait up for me. Of course, honey, she smiled. Good luck with the meeting. As soon as the door closed behind him, she pulled out her phone. Dad, he went to see her at the Magnolia Hotel. Our men are already there. They're recording his every move. Camila walked slowly through the apartment. Everything in here held memories of their life together. Pictures on the walls, souvenirs from their travels, gifts to each other. She stopped at the bedroom closet, opened the door. Half of Mauricio's things had already been secretly moved to her father's house. She was preparing for the decisive day. The phone rang around 10 p.m. Ramirez. They're still at the hotel, discussing options to salvage the situation. Mariana suggests fleeing abroad. And Mauricio? He's against it. Says he's lost too much to give up. By the way, he's planning a big deal next week. Looks like a last-ditch effort to save the day. Camila walked over to the window. It was beginning to rain outside, the drops drumming quietly on the glass. Señorita Camila, Ramirez's voice became softer. Are you sure you want to continue? It might be easier to file for divorce and… No, she cut him short. He wanted to leave me without everything. Let him feel the same way. Mauricio came back past midnight. He smelled of Mariana's expensive perfume, the same one Camila had once smelled on his shirt, and believed the explanation about the new employee in the office. How was the meeting? She asked in a sleepy voice. Productive, he threw off his jacket. Seems to have found a solution to our problems. Our problems, Camila echoed in her head. She watched as he undressed, carefully hung up his suit, removed his watch, her last birthday present. So familiar and so foreign. She texted her father first thing in the morning. He's up to something. We need to be ready. The reply came instantly. Don't worry. We're monitoring his every move. Over breakfast, Mauricio seemed almost the same, attentive, caring. He talked about plans for the weekend, promised to arrange a romantic dinner. Camila kept the conversation going, smiled, served him coffee. The perfect wife, unaware of betrayal. Only when the door closed behind him did she let the mask fall, sat down on the kitchen floor and cried, for the first time in ages. Not out of grief, out of rage. Did he think he was playing with her? No, she was playing him. The last days before the denouement were particularly hard on Camila. Each morning began with a check of the messages from Ramirez, brief reports on Mauricio's actions, his attempts to save his failing business, his meetings with potential investors. The lawyer reported everything with pedantic precision. On this sunny Saturday morning, Camila woke up earlier than usual. Mauricio was still asleep, his breathing even and calm. She looked at his face, so serene in her sleep, and tried to find a hint of the man she had once loved. Now, every feature of him seemed like a false mask. In the kitchen, She habitually turned on the coffee maker. The sound of grinding beans reminded her of their first apartment, the tiny studio where they'd started married life. They'd had an old manual grinder then, and Mauricio had ground coffee every morning trying not to wake her. The phone vibrated softly, a message from her father. "Good morning, daughter. Ramirez has prepared the last documents. Need your signature." She answered briefly, "I'll be there in 2 hours." Mauricio came down to the kitchen as she was finishing making breakfast. He kissed her on the cheek as he had done hundreds of times before. Pancakes? You spoil me." "Just wanted to spoil you." She set the plate in front of him, noting to herself how easy it was to lie now. "I'm meeting with some new investors today." He spread jam on a pancake. "It seems we've finally found a way out of this." Camila sat across from him, warming her hands against her coffee cup. "Really? That's wonderful." "Yes. They are willing to enter the project on very favorable terms. We just need to settle some formalities." She knew it was a lie. Ramirez had already found out. There were no investors. Mauricio was just stalling, trying to find a way to salvage at least some of the assets. After breakfast, he left and Camila went to her father's office. There was an impressive stack of documents waiting for her in Rodrigo's office. "These are the final papers." Ramirez spread them out in front of her. "Once you sign, all company assets will be protected." She methodically went through each sheet, placing sprawling signatures. The handwriting remained firm, though everything inside trembled with tension. "How are you holding up?" her father asked when they were alone. "Fine," she tried to smile. "Just want it to be over soon." Back at home, she went about the usual Saturday chores: laundry, cleaning, menu planning for the week. Mauricio's phone kept ringing. He went out on the balcony to talk, but Camila had learned to read his mood by the intonation of his voice through the glass door. Today, he was particularly agitated. Around 3 o'clock, Victoria called, "Hey, girlfriend, how are you?" "Hanging in there." Camila sank down on the couch. "You know, the weird thing is, I'm almost used to this state of constant pretense." "Not much left," her friend sounded sympathetic. "Do you want me to come over?" "No, I need to keep a clear head. Big day tomorrow." After talking, she pulled out her suitcase and began to discreetly put some things away. The essentials had already been moved to her father's house, but there were still little things left: jewelry, documents, memorabilia. Mauricio returned in the evening. He smelled of whiskey and cigars. Apparently, the meeting with the investors was held in a bar. He looked both excited and depressed at the same time. "How was the meeting?" she asked, serving dinner. "Fine." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Just tired." Camila noticed his hands trembling as he picked up his fork. She wondered what he was thinking about his plans falling apart, about Mariana waiting for the promised future. Or maybe, somewhere in the back of his mind, he feels a reckoning approaching. She lay awake long into the night, listening to his breathing. Mauricio was tossing and turning, mumbling something in his sleep. Once she heard Mariana's name clearly. Sunday morning began with a message from Ramirez. "Everything is ready, just waiting for your signal." She went down to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast as she had done for the past 12 years. She turned on the radio. The weather report was on. They were promising a thunderstorm. Mauricio appeared in the kitchen just as she was finishing frying eggs. He looked unusually nervous. "Honey, I'm going to have to leave for a couple days. A business trip to Medellin." Camila barely held back a chuckle. She knew there was no business trip. He was planning to meet Mariana at the country house. "Of course, sweetheart. When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll be back on Tuesday." "No," she thought. "You're not going anywhere. You'll have completely different plans tomorrow." The day stretched on endlessly. Camila did the usual chores: cooking dinner, sorting through the mail, watering the flowers. Mauricio spent most of his time in his office talking on the phone. In the evening, he tried to be especially attentive, ordered her favorite pizza, offered to watch a movie. As if he was trying to make amends she supposedly didn't know. "You know," he said as they sat on the couch, "things are going to get better soon, I promise." Camila smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "I know, honey. I believe in you." That last lie came easiest to her. Tomorrow the masks would be dropped. Tomorrow the storm would begin. Monday morning was overcast. Camila walked Mauricio to the door, kissed him goodbye, wished him a good trip to Medellin. He left with a small travel bag containing things for the business trip. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, Camila pulled out her phone. "He's on his way. Which hotel?" "Magnolia," Ramirez answered. "The room is already booked in Mariana's name, a suite on the 12th floor." Camila quickly changed into the strict black suit she had prepared in advance. She gathered her hair into a tight bun and put on pearl earrings, a gift from her father for her 30th birthday. Her makeup was impeccable, as if she were going to an important negotiation. In a way, she was. Rodrigo was waiting for her in the car outside the house. His personal driver, Raúl, who had served the family for more than 15 years, sat behind the wheel. The interior of the car smelled of expensive leather and his father's cologne. "Are they at the hotel yet?" Camila asked, buckling her seatbelt. "Yes. Mauricio arrived 10 minutes ago. Mariana was waiting for him in his room." They were silent on the road. Camila stared at the streets of Bogotá floating by outside the window, trying to gather her thoughts. All these months she had visualized this moment, rehearsed every word, every gesture. Now that the hour of reckoning had come, she felt strangely calm. The Magnolia Hotel stood a glass tower in the business center of the city. The doorman opened the doors obligingly for Rodrigo Velázquez. He was well known here. Camila walked beside her father with her head held high. Ramirez was already waiting for them in the lobby with a folder of documents. "Everything is ready," the lawyer reported quietly. "Security has been alerted that we'll be going up to the suite. I have a spare key." The corridor was empty. Their footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet. Near room 1217 they stopped. Ramirez pulled out a key card, but Camila shook her head. "No, I want them to know we're coming." She knocked on the door, loudly, confidently. Some fumbling was heard inside, muffled voices. "Who's there?" Mauricio's voice sounded worried. "Room service," Camila replied in her usual voice. A second of silence, then the sound of hurried footsteps. The click of a lock and the door opened. Mauricio froze on the threshold, his face rapidly turning pale. "Camila?" He crept back into the room. "What? How?" She entered, followed by Rodrigo and Ramirez. Mariana, dressed in a silk hotel robe, jumped up from the bed. There were unfinished champagne glasses on the coffee table and her favorite white roses in a vase. "What a lovely meeting," Camila looked around the room. "A business trip to Medellin, then?" "I can explain," Mauricio began, but she raised her hand, stopping him. "Don't bother. I've known about your plans for a long time, about how you were going to leave me without everything, how you promised her my possessions, my home, my life." Mariana tried to say something, but Rodrigo cut her off. "Be silent, señorita. Your position is humiliating enough as it is." Mauricio shifted his gaze from his wife to his father-in-law. "What is the meaning of all this? Why are you here?" "Because," Ramirez opened a folder of documents, "that you, Señor Gutierrez, have made a number of serious mistakes. First, you underestimated your wife. Second, you forgot exactly who helped you build your business." Camila slowly walked over to the table, picked up her champagne glass. "You know what the funny thing is, Mauricio? When you gave me the bracelet trying to put my guard down, I had already read your letters to her. When you talked about love, I heard your phone calls. Every move you made, every move you made, I knew about everything. Impossible, he whispered. I was careful. Not enough. Rodrigo stepped close to his son-in-law. Did you really think you could deceive my daughter and get away with it? Mariana finally found her voice. Mauricio, what's going on? You promised that everything was under control. Oh, everything is indeed under control. Camila set her glass back down. Just not under yours, dear. Ramirez, show them the papers. The lawyer began laying out papers on the table. Here are the documents transferring all the company's assets into Senora Camila's name. Here are the certificates of ownership of the real estate. And this is a list of your debts that you will now have to pay personally, Senor Gutierrez. Mauricio grabbed the documents with trembling hands. This is illegal. I'm going to sue. Sue, Ramirez replied calmly. Everything is done perfectly legally. Every signature, every comma, all checked by the best lawyers in the country. Camila watched her husband's face contort with the realization of what was happening. As Mariana grabbed her clothes in a panic, trying to get dressed, it all seemed almost amusing. Two conspirators caught red-handed. I loved you, Mauricio said suddenly, looking at his wife. Once really loved you. Perhaps, she shrugged, but you loved money more, and you know what? Now you have neither. Mariana, already dressed, rushed to the door. I can't. I have to go. Sure, go, Camila smiled at her. Just don't forget to return the ring, the one he gave you. It belongs to me now, too. The girl removed the jewelry with trembling fingers and placed it on the table, ran out of the room without looking back. Mauricio collapsed into a chair, still clutching the papers in his hands. What are you going to do now? Live, Camila replied simply. Without lies, without betrayal, without you. She turned to her father. Let's go, Papa. There's nothing more to do here. At the door, she stopped. Oh yes, Mauricio. Don't forget to check out of the hotel before noon. The bill, of course, is on you. It's the last luxury you can afford. In the hallway, Camila finally allowed herself to exhale. Her legs were shaking, but she held herself upright. Rodrigo put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. You've been holding up great. I just want to go home, she said quietly. There was a car waiting for them downstairs. Raúl opened the door and Camila slid into the back seat. Only here, in the safety of her father's car, did she let the tears flow down her cheeks. Rodrigo silently held out a handkerchief to her. It's over, daughter. No, Papa, she wiped her eyes. It's just beginning. Tuesday began for Mauricio Gutierrez with a phone call. His CFO, panting with excitement, announced that all company accounts had been permanently blocked and the major assets had been transferred to his wife's name. He sat in the hotel room he had moved into after yesterday's disclosure and listened to his life fall apart. Senor Gutierrez, what do we do? Suppliers are demanding payment. Workers are asking about wages. Mauricio couldn't answer. His gaze wandered to the economy room. It was all he could afford now. The phone kept ringing off the hook. Creditors, partners, lawyers. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. At the same time, Camila was sitting in her father's office, reviewing the company's status reports. Beside her was Ramirez, methodically explaining each item. As you can see, Senor Gutierrez, almost all the assets are now under your control. What remains is to settle some formalities with the real estate. She nodded, flipping through the pages. The numbers were adding up to a clear picture. There was no stone left unturned from her husband's business empire. What about the company's employees? She asked. Most have already been notified. Some key personnel have agreed to come under your leadership. Rodrigo, who had been watching his daughter, nodded approvingly. You're doing the right thing in thinking of the people. It's not their fault their boss turned out to be a traitor. The company office was in chaos. Employees were packing up, transferring important files, trying to figure out what was going on. Mauricio showed up there close to noon, but his appearance only made matters worse. "There's some kind of mistake," he tried to explain to the board. "We can fix it." "I'm afraid not, Senor Gutierrez." The company's general counsel placed a stack of documents in front of him. "Everything has been done perfectly legally. Your wife now owns a controlling interest." Mariana had been trying to call him all day, but he didn't answer. What could he tell her? That all their plans, their dreams of a life of luxury, had crumbled like a house of cards. After lunch, Camila arrived at the office. She entered with a confident stride, accompanied by Ramirez and 2 guards. The staff froze as they watched her walk through the open space to her husband's office. Mauricio sat at his desk, mindlessly poring over papers. At the sight of his wife, he jumped up. "Why have you come? Do you want to enjoy my humiliation?" "No," she lowered herself calmly into the visitor's chair. "I've come to take back what is rightfully mine. Ramirez, show me the paperwork." The lawyer laid a new stack of papers on the table. "Here's the contract for the transfer of management of the company. All you need to do is sign it." Mauricio looked at the documents like a poisonous snake. "And if I refuse?" "Then we'll turn over information about your financial fraud to the prosecutor's office," Ramirez replied calmly. "I'm sure they'll be interested to know exactly how you plan to move your assets out." Mauricio's hand trembled as he signed. Each stroke of the pen seemed to carve out a part of his life. "What now?" he asked, setting the pen aside. "Now you will gather your personal belongings and leave the building." Camila rose. "Security will make sure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you." She watched him put photos, awards, personal belongings into a box. 12 years of his life fit into one cardboard box. Mauricio's phone rang again, this time the realtor who was handling the house for him and Mariana. "Senor Gutierrez, there's a problem with the paperwork here." "Forget about the house," he replied tiredly. "The deal is off." Camila was sitting in his, now her, office when the report from the bank arrived. All of Mauricio's accounts were empty. His credit cards were blocked. Even his personal car now belonged to her. It was registered to the company. "What about his personal belongings from the apartment?" Ramirez asked. "Let him take it," she shrugged. "I don't need any reminders of our life." By evening, news of Mauricio Gutierrez's collapse had spread throughout Bogotá's business community. His phone stopped ringing. Everyone realized he no longer mattered. Camila returned to her father's house late at night. Rodrigo was waiting for her in the study. "How are you?" "Tired." She sank into a chair. "But it's the right kind of tired." He poured her a glass of wine. "You've done well, daughter. Today you showed everyone what it means to mess with the Velasquez family." The phone vibrated a message from Victoria. "Saw the news. Are you okay?" "Yeah," Camila replied. "Everything's going to be okay now." At night she couldn't sleep for a long time. Her mind replayed the events of the day. Mauricio's face as he signed the papers, the confused looks from the staff, the calls from creditors. She knew what she'd done was cruel, but he'd left her no choice. Another day greeted Bogotá with pouring rain. Camila sat in her new office looking through the morning papers. All the business publications had headlines about Mauricio Gutierrez's collapse and his wife's takeover of the company. Some journalists had even managed to dub it the corporate revenge of the year. Her musings were interrupted by the secretary's call. "Senora Gutierrez, your husband is downstairs. He insists on seeing you." Camila paused, looking at her reflection in the black computer screen. She knew this moment would come. "Have him come up," she finally replied. "And contact Ramirez. Have him ready to come up at a moment's notice." Mauricio entered the office a few minutes later. There was no trace of his usual gloss, wrinkled suit, unshaven face, circles under his eyes. He stopped in the middle of the room, as if hesitant to approach the desk where he had recently sat. "Camila," his voice sounded hoarse. "We need to talk." "Have a seat." She pointed to the visitor's chair. "You have 5 minutes." He sank into the chair, nervously adjusting his tie. "Look, I know I made a terrible mistake, but we can make it right. 12 years of marriage can't just be thrown away." "We can," she interrupted. "You did it yourself when you planned to leave me without everything, when you lied to my face, when you promised that girl my possessions." "I didn't love her," he pitched forward. "It was obfuscation, stupidity." "Don't grovel," Camila grumbled. "We both know it wasn't about love. You just miscalculated, thought I was a weak, stupid woman who could be fooled around." Outside the window, the rain intensified, the drops drumming on the glass, creating a bizarre rhythm. Mauricio stood up and started pacing around the office. "What do you want? Revenge? You got it. I've lost everything. My company, my reputation, my money." "Sit down," a steely note appeared in her voice. "That's not what you came for. Tell me what you really want." He collapsed back into the chair. "I need money, Camila. At least some to start over. I can sign any documents, give any guarantees." Camila opened a desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "I knew you'd come for this. Here's a check for $50,000. That's all you'll get." Mauricio grabbed the envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you. Don't thank me," she raised her hand, stopping him. "This money isn't from me. My father gave it to me. Said it was payment for the lesson you taught me. A lesson about not trusting even the people closest to you." Something akin to shame flashed in his eyes. "Camila, I did love you. At the beginning of our marriage, when we first started—" "Shut up," she stood up abruptly. "Don't you dare talk about love. Not here. Not now. Not after everything." Mauricio stood up, still clutching the envelope. "What are you going to do with the company now?" "That's none of your business anymore," she walked over to the window. "But if you're interested, I'm going to turn it into what it should have been from the beginning. An honest, transparent business." "And Mariana?" His voice trembled. "You fired her, didn't you?" Camila grinned. "No. I offered her a promotion and a transfer to the Medellin branch. She accepted and told me a lot of interesting things about your plans." He turned pale. "She couldn't have." "She did. And she did it with the same ease that you betrayed me. Funny, isn't it? You both turned out to be worthy of each other." There was a knock at the door. Ramirez entered with a folder of documents. "Señora Gutierrez, everything is ready for the press conference." "Thank you, Gabriel. I'll be right with you," she turned to her husband. "Our conversation is over. Security will escort you to the exit." Mauricio took a step toward the door but stopped. "You know what the worst part is? I can't even hate you, because you did exactly what I would have done if I were you." "No," she shook her head. "I did what a woman who's been betrayed should do. And you know what? I can't hate you either. You mean nothing to me anymore." He walked out, slouching as if under the weight of her words. Camila watched the door close behind him, the last door in their shared history.